Welcome back, everyone. This is Kevin Miller, President of Vision Bound International, welcoming you to another webinar in our series of Interweave Solutions Virtual Learning. We're trying to help you learn how to be a great leader, to help you fill that toolbox that I talked about. And by the way, I hope you watched the introduction to this whole series because I explained why we're in my garage, all about the tools and so forth. And I talked about giving you tools in your toolbox to be a more effective leader. This adds to all the things that you've learned in the Masters of Business on the Streets program, which we learn as a foundation, and this is additional light and knowledge which will help you. So I already did one webinar that hopefully you might have watched on how to be a great listener. But now I want to talk about another skill, and that is how to resolve conflict. All I know is that I've lived now 68 years, and my life has been filled with issues with people. From the time I was little till the time I'm old, I've been married. I've been married 44 years. I've got a wife and 4 children and 6 grandchildren, and I've also been a part of businesses all over the world. And I know that part of business and part of your work will involve conflict. Now, first of all, as we're going to learn in the presentation, which will follow here, there's a difference between conflict and contention. Conflict can be a very healthy thing, and we're going to learn why that's true. In fact, no real progress is made without some kind of conflict about things. And it's how we resolve those conflicts so that we become together with the person and get to a higher level of thinking. However, contention is always wrong. Contention is negative. Conflict is neutral. We'll learn about that in the presentation that's about to follow. So, what I want to point out, as you watch the slides, you're going to learn that there's kind of 2 ways people resolve conflict. Sometimes they just want to avoid it, or they just passively avoid it and never deal with it. Other times they get very aggressive and start forcing their opinion on other people. And that lends towards the negative side. In fact, let me show you a little thing here that I created. Sometimes in conflict, look at it as being a balancing thing. Now, if you look on this side of it, it says, I win, you lose. In other words, you bring me a problem, I win, you lose. I'm going to force my solution on you, and that's going to be a resolution of the conflict. And maybe it's short term, it gets something done, but it almost always hurts relationships. There's sometimes in emergency situations, it's applicable. But on the other hand, they have that you win, I lose. In other words, I just give in to you. I kowtow, so to speak. And that's not good either. The I win, you lose, the you win, I lose, these aren't ways to effectively communicate and resolve conflict. So in the middle, there's a sweet spot. And you can see that on my thing here. It's the sweet spot. It's how you know which style to use. And you find a balance between your needs and the other person's needs, and you come up with a win-win solution. Not I win, you lose, not you lose, I win, or whatever. It's about the sweet spot. So it's nobody winning over somebody else. They're working together. That's what we're going to learn in this workshop. So you're going to watch now a series of slides and a presentation about resolving conflict. Now please print out, like I said, the handout that goes with this. You should have received a link to a handout, and the handout has a lot of information in it and some applications at the end. So once again, Kevin Miller welcoming you to this webinar on resolving conflict. You'll see me again at the end after we watch the slides and do some learning. Thanks, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to this workshop webinar on how to resolve conflict. I hope you're enjoying these webinars that I've been presenting, and this one is a very important topic because all of us have conflict in our lives. No one gets out of the conflict. It's a part of life. But conflict, as we're going to learn, can really be a powerful thing to grow with. It doesn't have to become contentious. So this workshop is about how to resolve conflict and help you to become more effective in all of your relationships. So everyone should have printed off this packet called Resolving Conflict. It's a PDF. I'd like you to have it in front of you while you're taking the webinar. If you don't have it, you'll be able to see pictures of it on the screen, and you can even take screenshots of it if you want. So I want to start out with something kind of cute. This is a little kitten discovering her feet for the first time. So let's learn something new.
You never knew you needed this, but today you get to witness this kitten realize it has 4 paws for the first time.
Pretty cute, huh? That kitten found out he's got 4 paws for the first time. Well, that's what learning does for us. It helps us to grow and develop and become more effective as we grow forward in our lives. So, I really like this quote. The human mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its former shape. Every time we learn something, our minds stretch, and they never quite go back to what they were before. And that's what we want. So, as we start this workshop, I want to give you a principle alert. And I already mentioned it, but we don't want to confuse conflict with contention. The two are much different. Conflict can be powerful, effective, help us to grow and learn and improve. Contention is always negative. So we'll learn that in this workshop. I like this point. Conflict is inevitable, but contention is a choice. And there's a big difference. We don't want to cross that bridge from conflict to contention. We want to keep conflict to be a positive and growing thing. So this is one key for life success at home or at work. We need to respect, value, appreciate, and embrace differences. The strength of relationships is not in the similarities, but often in the differences. In fact, Benjamin Franklin said, "Love your enemies, for they tell you your faults." So sometimes we need people to tell us what our faults are so that we can grow. I like this funny cartoon by Gary Larson. God is making the earth and he's sprinkling in some reptiles, some trees, some medium-skinned people, dark-skinned people. But look what he's sprinkling into the world, jerks. So sometimes difficult people just make life interesting, but sometimes they can cause conflict and we need to learn how to handle it. I like this cartoon. I wish all of you would settle your differences before you come to work. So we need to get everybody, like these dogs, pulling together and getting on the right road. So Stephen Covey said, when you look on a difference between you and associates as a strength, not a weakness, then you reflect the spirit of synergy. You begin to seek objective feedback on your performance, your products, and your services. You look for ways to build a complementary team where the strengths of one compensate for the weaknesses of another. You realize that the strength of a relationship lies in its differences. Very, very powerful concept. Now, we also know how critical it is for us to communicate. Parkinson's third law says, the void created by the failure to communicate is soon filled with poison, drivel, and misrepresentation. So my friends, we cannot not communicate. If it creates a void, it's going to be filled with stuff we don't want. So to get started, I'd like you to go to page 2 of your packet. We won't spend time on it in the workshop, but you could do it afterwards. But what you do is you reflect on a current conflict or experience that you've had, and you place a check mark next to some of these things. Nothing was done, so the conflict was never resolved. Conflict began turning into contention. One person aggressively forced a solution on the other person. One or more people apologized. So what you want to do is you want to look at a conflict that you recently had and put check marks to see how it went. And then at the bottom it says, what should have happened for it to be a A grade? So if you gave it a C grade, this did not go well, what would you like to have happened for it to be an A grade? So it's just a little activity that you can do to judge a conflict that you've had recently. So now, we'll be going more of this in detail, but there's 5 steps for a conflict resolution process. Number 1, you've got to identify the right problem. What is the problem of the conflict? Who is it involving? What's the conflict about? Is it methods, attitudes, goals? But then go deeper to identify the root cause. Why is this happening? Is it a different information, rules, responsibilities, whatever? Then identify possible solutions. determine how you want things to change, determine how important it is that things change, and then determine how much time you're willing to invest in conflict resolution. And then how important is the relationship. Then you implement the solution, and finally you track and evaluate the solution. So this is a 5-step process. We'll learn more as we go on. So right now, if we were in a class, I'd have you pair up. But since this is a webinar, you might want to pause if there's someone in your family or your work group and just discuss what are common ways people you know deal with conflict. So just discuss this. But it's the webinar, so I'll just leave that as maybe a little assignment, or you could put a pause on it and have a little discussion. So there's basically some choices in conflict style. And there's basically 5 types. There's controlling or forcing, accommodating, avoiding, compromising, and collaborating. And these are the factors that you need to consider when you're choosing what type of conflict style. I'll let you read these through later, but let me just touch on a couple of them. Sometimes controlling is critical if it is a quick, decisive action is needed, or important issues that are unpopular that need implementing. And when others will take advantage of you if you're non-competitive. But it's much better to be accommodating, and even better to be collaborative. But accommodating, if you find out you're wrong, accommodate. When the issue is important to another person and not important to you, accommodate. To build social credits for labor use or minimize loss when you're outmatched and losing. So you might want to refer to this when you decide what you want to do with a conflict. Now, avoiding is when an issue is really trivial and you don't even just avoid it. If you have no chance of winning, to let others cool down. So there's times to avoid, but ultimately we want to compromise or collaborate. Compromising is when both people give in a little bit, and it says when goals are important but not worth the effort to do collaboration. And when opponents with equal power are committed to mutually exclusive goals, you might just have to compromise. Middle ground, meet in the middle. But collaborating is the best way. Find solutions when both parties' concerns are too important to be compromised. Don't just jump to compromise, friends. Try to collaborate, especially when a long-term relationship between the parties is very important, like in a marriage or an important business relationship. And to gain commitment of all parties by building consensus. So these are factors, and I hope that you'll keep this in mind when you're trying to decide what to do about a conflict. So we're going to go through some keys on this, and the first key is you accept conflict as a natural part of life and see it as an opportunity, not as something to be feared or avoided. So a lot of people are afraid of conflict instead of seeing it as an opportunity. And the reason is language has messed it up, really. When you think of the word conflict, 5 words often come to mind first, like antagonism, fight, argument, and it's really not right, because even the dictionary doesn't help. Dictionary defines conflict as fight, battle, war, competitive, opposing action of incompatibles, mental struggle from incompatible needs, Folks, this is not a good definition of a conflict. Instead, it's better to define it as the consequence of differences that exist and need to be managed. That's all conflict is. It's a consequence of differences that exist and need to be managed. So, with that in mind, conflict is natural and inevitable. It can be a motivator for change. It can result over competition, over values or something. It can be constructive or destructive. And it can contribute to individual and organizational health. And above all, it can be managed to minimize loss and maximize gains. So, think about it. This is a great quote by Warren Bennis. Leaders do not avoid, repress, or deny conflict, but rather see it as an opportunity. Once everyone has come to see it that way, They can exchange their combative posture for a creative stance because they don't feel threatened. They feel challenged. So good leaders do not avoid, repress, or deny conflict, but turn it into an opportunity. Great quote by Warren Bennis. So why is conflict often good? Well, it's basically neutral, unavoidable, and should be faced. But contention, on the other hand, has a very negative effect on relationships and should be avoided. So the second key is we're going to decide at the outset to act on conflict in a positive, proactive way, not react to it. So we decide we're going to act on the conflict and not just run from it. So on the next pages, on page 7 and 8 in your packet, there's a personal application work packet that I would like you to work on. You can either do it now and pause and come back to the webinar, or you can save to the end. But it's basically you're describing a recent conflict and what caused it, what level is it, and so forth. And at part 6 at the bottom is did you avoid, compromise, collaborate? Anyway, so these pages give you a chance to analyze a recent conflict that you've had and to think about how it turned out. And step 9 on it says decide what you really want for yourself, others, and the relationship, and then write a plan for resolving this conflict based on the things we're learning in this class. So what is your plan, and what are you going to do? What are your smart steps by when? So, and then some scripts that you might want to practice. So all of this will make more sense after the rest of the workshop. In fact, we'll return to this later. I just want you to be aware that it's something that you're going to be doing and working with. So now we have some options. Here is an activity and options that tells you what you could do with a particular conflict. For instance, a temporary settlement would work. Do you say that's true? If it is, then which do you want to do? Avoid, compromise, or collaborate? If a temporary settlement would work, maybe a compromise would be best. Others could resolve the disagreement more effectively. Well, collaboration probably would be good there. Both sets of concerns cannot be compromised, then you have to go to collaborate. People need to cool off, avoid. So I think when you go through this, you can understand. An unpopular rule needs to be implemented. Well, that may be controlling. Is it necessary to build credibility for issues to be resolved later? Probably collaboration. It's essential to gain commitment, collaboration. More important issues need attention, maybe you should avoid or compromise. Different perspectives must be combined, that would be collaboration. And there's time pressure, may be controlling. And quick and decisive action is needed, could be controlling. So once again, this page helps you kind of look at your options. So, but this is a very important hint. If you notice irritation in self or others, check feelings. Do you or the other person feel diminished, disrespected, unappreciated, or undervalued? If these feelings are present, stop. Because you're not going to get much traction going forward if people feel these things. These are 4 difficult feelings for people to have. So you want to stop and communicate value and appreciation before you go on. So, the whole soul idea is that we are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. And so we need to make sure that when we're working with someone that we're respectful of the mind, their heart, their body, and their spirit. And that is a very important part of this process. So now, are we going to be proactive or reactive? Proactivity is behavior focused on what I can control with an internal control. Reactive is behavior focused on values of actions of others with an external locus of control. So try to be proactive. Look at what you can control, not be reactive to others. Be a builder, focused on the positive, respect others, and mind your ego. So, action versus reaction. An action is a behavior based on values and personal choices, but reactions are replies or behaviors prompted by external influences. So you want to base your behavior on internal values and choices, and the key is to act, not react, in any conflict situation, because if you don't, it could turn into contention. So, Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound in cure, and we've learned that. So I want to tell you a little story about a mother. I met her at a conference, and she told me an amazing story. She had like 5 children, and she would tell them to go and clean up their room. And they would go in for 5 minutes and come out and say, I did it, Mom. But when she went in, their idea of clean and her idea of clean were totally different. So they would think this was a clean room, maybe, or maybe just pick up a few things. So she realized that the conflict was coming from unclear expectations. The children did not know what the standard of a clean room was. So she made it very fun. She worked with them, and they got the room looking very, very clean. And then she took pictures of the clean room, just the way the children liked it, the way she liked it, how they wanted their clothes to be hanged, how they wanted their toys to look. And she put pictures of it on the back of the door. And she said, if your room looks like these pictures by noon on Saturday, I will put your weekly allowance on your bed with a special treat. If it doesn't, I keep your allowance in my fun fund, and you owe me 2 hours of hard labor later in the week. But the choice is yours. I will never remind you. So it was so cool because she told me that the kids could really do it now. They didn't let the chemicals dumb us down and go to their lizard brains. In fact, she said when she did this, one time she came in the room and she saw her 3-year-old daughter looking at the door and moving her stuffed animal 3 inches on her desk and looking under the bed to make sure there was nothing under it, because there was a picture of what was under the bed. But the best thing that happened was that she came down on Saturday morning and found her 14-year-old daughter cleaning her 15-year-old brother's room for him. She was in his room cleaning his room, and she could tell how to do it because the door had pictures. And she said, why are you cleaning Johnny's room? And she said, well, he called from scout camp and said if I would do it, I could have half his allowance. So it was a win-win for her. So if we don't do this, what happens is we get dumbed down by the chemicals. Because emotions are chemicals. There's a good book called The Molecules of Emotion. And if we're not careful, the emotions, these chemicals can jump into our brain and cause us to freak out and become difficult. So the third key is to identify the real roots and sources of a conflict before you begin to resolve it. So what are the sources or the roots of the conflict? Might be miscommunication, opposing objectives, variance in methods, or differing values, even a personality type. But I'll tell you, the personality type are more difficult than just miscommunications. Personality type issues or valuing of differences of values is more difficult. Hopefully it's more of a matter of miscommunication. And there can be power struggles or competition for limited resources. There's all kinds of things. There can even be conflict-prone job duties like police officer. So basically, most conflict arises from unmet expectations. If the expectations are clear, like the mother had by putting the pictures of the door on the door of the clean room, then she avoided the conflict and avoided any contention. Now, we got to remember, though, that sometimes our reactions come out of past experiences, not the actual issue at hand. So the real issue at hand may not be what's causing our reaction. It's coming from a past experience, even something from our childhood or a past argument that we might have had. So basically, my friends, at this point, I just want you to realize that perception is all there is.
And Stephen Covey said, we don't see the world the way it is. We see the way we are. So we have our own perceptions, and how we perceive a situation could be much different than another person. In fact, this is a famous painting. If you look at this painting, there's actually two ways to see a woman in this. A very young woman or a very old woman. And once you see one, it's hard to see the other. But the young woman is looking off in the distance. Her ear is by her hair. Her nose is kind of going off to the left. She's wearing a necklace. If you look at the old woman, the ear is an eye. She has a big nose and a thin mouth and a big chin. So there's a young woman and an old woman. And it's a matter of perception. It's what you see. And that often is what happens in conflict situations. So the fourth key is we want to use skills. We want to follow the steps in a conflict resolution process and a model. So here is the useful model on page 6 that we can follow. So on the top of page 6 we see a circle, and it has a pyramid. And surrounding the pyramid there are some legs. And let's take a look at it. So first of all, when we look at this model at the top and we see the resolve model, to respect the other person's right to disagree, explore for understanding, share needs, objectives, and desired outcomes, overcome negativity through effective communication, look at the options, and verify the best solution, one that's doable, and then entrust the other person with your agreement. That's the resolve model. But let's take a closer look at the conflict pyramid. So the most important thing is on the outside of the pyramid there's 3 legs. Maintain the self-esteem of yourself and the other person. Focus on the problem. And build constructive relationships. That's holding the pyramid together. Then we need to recognize feelings in ourselves and others. And if the feelings are negative and need to be resolved, stop. Don't try to go on until you've recognized the person's feelings. Then you define the problem. What is the problem? And get it so that both people understand it. Then clarify the other person's expectations of you. So what would you like to see coming out of this solution? And really listen to them. Clarify their expectations. Then you begin exploring alternatives and move to action. So this is the conflict resolution model. And you might want to cut it out or take a picture of it with your cell phone and follow this as you move forward. Now also at the bottom of that page there is a ruler, R-U-L-E-R. So it's 6 inches. Recognize emotion, that's the R. Understand the emotion, that's the U. Label the emotion, that's anger, that's frustration, that's fear. Then express that emotion and then regulate the emotion. So if you're finding yourself being emotional, you need to recognize it, understand it, label it, express it, and regulate it. Because sometimes emotions can get in the way of being able to resolve a conflict effectively. So now page 3 of your packet has this 5-step process that we talked about. Identify the problem, the root cause, what are the possible solutions, implement the solution, and track and evaluate the solution. So that is that 5-step resolution process. The 5th key then is you want to choose the most appropriate conflict resolution style for the situation. So don't swat a fly with a Buick. In other words, don't deal with something minor with a truck. It's just kind of a joke, but sometimes we go overboard when it can just take a little bit of action to solve a problem. So understanding communication, there's 4 types of communication. There's aggressive, which aims to invade, control, and take advantage of another. And that results in forcing, like these little boys. That's a high concern for self and a low concern for others. But you might want to consider it when quick, decisive action is vital, or important issues where unpopular actions need implementing, or if others will take advantage of your non-competitive behavior. So that's why you might want to consider it. Now, so there's 4 basic types of communication. Here's another kind: passive communication. This allows others to invade, take advantage, and control with the speaker's consent. And so in this case, you're just allowing the other people to control you in a passive way with your consent. This is typical what people do when they avoid. It's low concern for self and a higher concern for others. Okay, it's avoiding both. It's actually avoiding both. Avoiding concern for self and concern for others, you're just avoiding it. So you want to consider avoiding when the issue is trivial or when more important issues are pressing and you have no chance of winning. When the potential for disruption outweighs the benefits of resolution, or to let others cool down and regain perspective. And you might want to avoid when the long-term costs of winning may outweigh the short-term goals. So there's times when you want to avoid, but be careful about that. So accommodating is a little different. It's a high concern for others and a low concern for self. In other words, it's giving in, like this guy with the white flag. It's accommodating. But hey, you might want to do that when you're wrong, or when the issue is important to the other party and not important to you, to build social credits for later use. So there's reasons why you might want to accommodate, and especially sometimes that bottom one, allow others to learn by making their own mistakes. Now, the next type is a passive-aggressive communication. This one is manipulative. There's times to be aggressive, there's times to be passive, but never, ever try to be passive-aggressive. It's manipulative, indirect, and dishonest. Assertive communication, on the other hand, is what we want to go towards. You express your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs openly, honestly, directly, and allow others to do the same. So that's where you go to compromising, where a high concern for yourself and concern for others is in the middle there. And you want to compromise when goals are important. And to do that, let me go back here. Goals are important, but not worth the effort of disruption of more assertive models. To achieve temporary settlements of complex issues, to arrive at expedient solutions under time pressure. These are reasons why you might want to compromise. And it's a backup when collaboration is unsuccessful. So we've all learned to compromise. The middle of the road method. We find the middle of the road, taking turns going back and forth, or yielding a little bit, or maybe sometimes even agreeing to disagree. So what we want to do is move towards collaboration. Collaborating is a high concern for others and a high concern for oneself. And you want to collaborate to find solutions when both parties' concerns are too important to be compromised. When a long-term relationship is more important. To gain commitment by all parties by building consensus, and when the other party is willing to take a collaborative approach. So there you go. So now, make sure though you're not on the bus to Abilene. That's an old story about someone who jumped on the bus thinking that everybody wanted to go, but nobody really wanted to go to Abilene. And sometimes we have to be very careful to not just get on the bus with everybody else when we think everybody wants to go there, when maybe nobody else does. So the 6th key then is validate the needs of yourself and others. So we want to find the needs of both ourselves and the others to be able to reach the right solution. And this great book, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die, by Carol Trueman, is a book you may want to read, because it talks about if you bury feelings and don't express them in a conflict situation, They don't die. They end up making you sick in various ways. Very, very interesting what she found. Also, another great book, I Don't Have to Make Everything All Better. The art of kind of learning how to work with people to solve their own problems and enriching your relationships. I recommend those books. So, finally, I like this idea that the 5 deepest needs of people is I am of worth, my thoughts, feelings, ideas, and perceptions matter and have been considered, someone really cares about me, what I'm doing is making a difference in the world, and my agency is being honored. These are deep needs of people, and when you're working with conflict, make sure that everyone knows they're of worth, their thoughts, feelings, ideas are matter and have been considered, that you care about them, and that try to show them how their life is making a positive difference in the world, and their freedom is being honored. Keep those deep needs in mind. So validation is simply the act, process, or instance of confirming or collaborating the meaningfulness and relevance of what another person or self is feeling. So we're trying to validate. It's being able to empathetically listen and understand another person's point of view without having to change it. And that comes from that book, I Don't Have to Make Everything All Better. So we want to use the right language to communicate. Mother Teresa said, peace begins with a smile. So communicate the right language when you're resolving conflict. So validating responses are when people just need to be validated. And you can say, I'll bet that's hard. That must be frustrating. I think I might have felt the same way. What a difficult position to be in. What a good way to handle that situation. So you just validate people. I'm so sorry that happened to you. What you're trying to do is help them feel understood and validated without changing it. If you have to ask questions during this process, you ask very open-ended questions. How do you feel about that? Do you feel I understand? What did you do? Then what did you say? What would you like to do? What do you think caused the problem? So what you're trying to do is with questions, you're trying to open people up. What would you like me to do? And I like the bottom, would it help if I, and name something you can do. These are the types of questions that help validate and keep the conflict open so you can resolve it. So, also additional hints, deal with one issue at a time. Don't try to get all bundled up with a bunch of issues. Apologize and forgive and persevere until mutually acceptable. So now I like Q-tips. Now they're not just useful for cleaning out your ear. A Q-tip can stand for quit taking it personal. QTIP. Don't take it personally. Let the hostile person vent their feelings and listen. Maintain the eye contact. Use their name and take notes. Ask questions. Apologize and mean it if you need to. Take responsibility and keep your promises. Those things will help resolving conflict. So on page 13 now, we have a path to action diagnosis. This can help you diagnose what happened in a path to action. I saw and heard this, and I told myself a story, so I felt hurt, and I acted in a mean way. But you saw and heard me act in a mean way, told yourself a story that I was a jerk, so you felt angry and acted angry. So what this does is it helps you see the path to action in both people as they move forward through the process. So now one of the great tools in communication and in resolving conflict is to learn how to use the I message. The I message is a clear way to express you, not the other person. So you have a basic problem and you go, I feel hurt when this happens because it makes me feel undervalued. How do you feel about it? And what can we do together to solve it? So this is how you own I feel when because. How do you feel about it? And what can we do together to solve it? Another useful tool is on page 12. This is where you can sit down with someone and put the issue in the cloud in the center. Then you write my view on the left and express your view, maybe using the iMessage. Then the other person's view until both people feel totally understood, and you write it down on both sides of the paper. And then you work on a solution. So based upon that, this is what we're going to do. Who does what by when, and how are we going to follow up? You can even get a signature on it if you want. But the bottom line is, it's just a tool to put on the paper, on the table on paper, that focuses everybody. There's my view, your view, our solution, and what is our action plan. So the sixth key then is to stay focused on the problem, not on the persons. Stay focused on the problem. Problem focus. Keep focused on the problem after you've identified the real roots of the problem. And so that's where this tool can help you do that again. My view, your view, what's the issue, and what's our solution. So now the final tool I'd like you to work on is page 14, the after action assignment and plan. What was the main learning point for you from today's session? Why do you think this concept can be of value to you as a leader? How do you plan to use this concept in your role as a leader? And number 4, what is one action you will take this coming week or 10 days to apply the concept? With whom, by when, and how will you do it? So this is kind of the final action of what you're going to do to make this workshop work for you in a specific situation. I'll close with a great quote that I love from that wonderful woman, Maya Angelou. She said, "They may not remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel." So remember that. I think about that as a father. My children may not remember what I said, but my children will always remember how I made them feel. My wife, clients, customers, everyone. How we leave people feeling is so critical. And leaving people feeling open, cared for, and positive is what makes conflict become a positive thing. So at the end of it, everybody feels better, and everybody has got a solution that they can agree with and don't feel hurt by. So thank you for watching. And now I would just like to invite you to learn from this and maybe review it, do that action plan, and carry it out. May you be uplifted in all of your relationships. Thank you for watching.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Now that you've watched and learned a little bit about the skills of resolving conflict, so no one is winning at the expense of someone else. So in the back of your packet, there is an application page. And I hope you will now fill that out and look at how you can apply what we learned. What is a conflict that you have right now in your life that you can turn into a positive thing? Don't let it become contention. There's a big difference, like you just learned. We don't want contention, but we actually want conflict so that we can come up with creative solutions. So once again, welcome. Glad you did some learning, and I hope you watch all of the series in this, and also watch the introduction video webinar, because that's explained what all these tools are. So resolving conflict is another tool in your leadership toolbox, and I hope that it is of value to you as it has been for me. Kevin Miller signing off, and I hope to see you in all of our webinars. Thank you for being a part of the Masters of Business in the Streets, a part of Interweave Solutions. We are out changing the world, one person, one business at a time. That's what we're trying to do. God bless all of you and your businesses, and thank you very much.